Hello, everyone. It's been quite a while. With illnesses and vacations, I haven't been around, and we're going to try to get right back into it and try to read today Chapter 3 of Good Man by Nathan Clarkson. And this chapter is entitled Heroic. There is a quote here. "It's not who I am underneath, but what I do that defines me." And that quote was Bruce Wayne in The Dark Knight. Acting chose me more than I chose it. I realized at some point around 18 when I was looking at the rest of my life that I had been playing pretend since I was a young boy. So when it came time to choose a direction for my life, I decided I simply didn't want to stop acting. As a kid, I would run around my house in a cape, acting like a superhero. When my family did Bible reenactments, I would demand I play David in the Goliath story. One time I dressed up as American soldier and actor Audie Murphy in real World War II military garb and everything for a class speech. And while I played in my backyard box forts in the recesses of my imagination, I always chose to play the hero because that's who I wanted to be. I've been acting professionally for over a decade, and one of the first things you learn as a young actor is your type, the kind of characters you will best play. Typecasting is a necessary and sometimes frustrating reality of an actor's life. I had envisioned myself as the leading man hero type at one point, so it was an interesting moment when the first casting director I ever talked to told me that I would most likely play villains. She wasn't wrong. In my very first ever speaking role in a movie, I was a masked murderer complete with an axe and a handgun. I then went on to play cult members, murder suspects, robbers, psychotic mental patients, and even your run-of-the-mill sexist frat boy. While these roles were fun, and I couldn't complain about living my dream, I still desired to be a hero. Since casting directors obviously hadn't gotten the memo, one day I decided to write my own story. I sat down and typed out a script, 90 pages, each one filled with the story of the hero I would someday play. The movie has yet to be made, but I wrote it because that's who I want to be and what I will always be working toward. I knew the story I wanted to tell. Stories are powerful. They have unique ability to change, teach, and inspire us in ways that nothing else can. Jesus changed the entire world with his stories, and God gave us his word as a collection of stories. Since the dawn of humankind, stories have appeared on cave walls in the form of crudely scribbled pictures, weaving their way into every known historical culture in all corners of the world. And we are ever learning and perfecting new and different ways of telling stories, even now, thousands of years later. We have an entire industry dedicated to their creation. Hollywood produces billions of dollars worth of stories each year because we continue to flip open our laptops, turn on our flat-screen TVs, and gather in old movie theaters with aged felt seats, stale popcorn, and overpriced tickets to lose ourselves in a narrative, even if only for a few hours. It's like our hearts and minds are hardwired to respond to stories, an internal drive that keeps us looking for and engaging with narratives outside our own. Something in the makeup of humanity allows us to see ourselves in the storyline and empathize with the characters. Growing up, my favorite stories were about Superman. Something about how steadfast, strong, and good he was drew me in and captured my mind as a boy. His crimson cape and steely stare ignited something in my young heart. I plastered posters of him around my room, reminding me that there was a way to live as a hero in my own world, just as he did in his. I was able to see myself as a hero in my own story. Superman might have been fighting evil masterminds who were determined to destroy the world, but as I read those pages, I was given the strength and inspiration to fight my own enemies of mental illness, learning disabilities, and boyhood struggles. That's what good stories do. They not only entertain us, but also serve as a parallel to our lives and an inspiration to live in our heroes' footsteps. But having lived in Hollywood for the better part of a decade, I've noticed a disturbing and unsettling trend. The heroes are disappearing. We once had a myriad of strong characters with unshakable morals and inspiring lives who we were able to look to and align ourselves with. As culture has moved into an age where we actually celebrate selfishness, greed, pride, arrogance, and subjective morality, we see the landscape of our modern stories becoming more and more void of good and true fictional figures. We've traded the virtue of Superman, the upright strength of Aragorn, the moral dedication of Luke Skywalker, the virtuous intellect of Sherlock Holmes for the corruption of Frank Underwood, the vitriol of Walter White, the violent cynicism of Deadpool, and the selfish, misogynistic hedonism of Don Draper. We have allowed our heroes to be replaced by anti-heroes who, upon further inspection, might just be straight-up villains. These anti-heroes enable us to connect with the more broken parts of ourselves without the pressure to rise above them and live up to an impossible image. These kinds of characters encourage us to live into and revel in the worst parts of ourselves, giving us allowance to sink lower into a comfortable mirror where goodness is seen as something that merely gets in the way of our getting what we truly want. But perhaps that's the problem: comfort. These anti-heroes ask nothing of us. They don't inspire us toward our better selves or push us to examine and work on our flaws. They invite us to revel in them. They tell us the ends justify the means. What we want is the most important thing, and nothing is more important than our wants. Don't get me wrong. I love complicated and morally nuanced characters, and I have thoroughly enjoyed some of the films and shows I listed, but still I worry that we are losing something when we trade classic and upright characters for corrupt and self-serving ones. I worry because the stories of any culture both inspire and are inspired by the hearts of men, and if we have only negative examples of how to live, void of any challenge to embrace virtue and goodness, I'm forced to wonder who we already are and who we are becoming. The questions I get asked most as an actor are, what's your favorite movie? And if you could play any role, what would it be? For a long time, I would think through what answer would make me sound most unique, relevant, and cool, naming pretentious Oscar winners in hopes of being seen as a real actor. But in the interest of transparency, my truthful answer is something less cool and far more cliché: Batman. When the film The Dark Knight came out in 2008, there seemed to finally be a hero on the big screen, Bruce Wayne, who had fears, failures, and doubts, but also overcame them, fought for what was right, and strived to do good in his world. For the first time in a long time, I could connect with a character on an imperfect human level while simultaneously being inspired to live out the life of a hero. But another character in that movie stole the show: the Joker. Batman's arch nemesis who threatens all that is good and pure with chaos and destruction. The Joker is played brilliantly by one of my favorite actors, Heath Ledger. His performance perfectly captured the nihilistic, chaotic, destructive, and violent mentality any good villain should have. But when the movie came out, a strange phenomenon happened. Bruce Wayne, or Batman, the hero of the movie was named after, took a back seat to the Joker. Perhaps it was the infamous villain's careless and untouchable swagger all of us guys wish we had that drew so many young men to his altar. Maybe it was he did what he wanted when he wanted, which is appealing to our darker sides. Or maybe it was simply because he was bound by nothing, no moral code, no virtuous expectations, no relational pitfalls, making him seemingly impervious to life. Even I was attracted to the alluring freedom of the Joker's cavalier, nothing-can-touch-me attitude, and it seemed like a lot of young men who were angry with life and fed up with being told what to do, falling short of societal expectations, and facing the chaos of a fractured world did too. At the time, most of us thought little about the phenomenon and left well enough alone. But then, on a warm and peaceful evening on July 20th, 2012, a villain came to life and killed 12 people in cold blood in a movie theater in my home state of Colorado. James Holmes, the Dark Knight shooter, dressed as his favorite villain, the Joker, using a story and character as fuel for his own sad, selfish, and violent narrative, took the lives of a dozen people and injured dozens more. While there might be fewer good, pure, and inspiring stories being made, and they might not be as popular, cool, or relevant in this modern age, stories matter. The characters and narratives we engage with will change us, for better or worse. A good man has a responsibility to search for, connect with, and perhaps even create good stories. Because the reality is, we are stories. The choices we make and actions we take here on earth make up the movie of our lives. And only we decide what kind of story that is. If we truly want to be good men, to be the hero, to live a movie worth telling, we must identify the shaping narratives that we can align ourselves with. We must choose the ones that encourage us to live greater and more beautiful lives, protecting others, showing us the truth, and inspiring us to live as better characters in our own stories. Questions for reflection. Number 1. Do you agree that stories have the power to shape and change us? Why or why not? Number 2. What stories did you grow up with and even engage with now that inspired and connected with you the most? What was it about them that you connected with? Number 3. What stories do you think might have a positive impact on you and the men of our culture today? What stories do you think might have a negative impact and why? He told many stories in the form of parables, such as this one. Listen. A farmer went out to plant some seeds as he scattered them across his field. Some seeds fell on a footpath, and the birds came and ate them. Other seeds fell on shallow soil with underlying rock. The seeds sprouted quickly because the soil was shallow, but the plant soon wilted under the hot sun, and since they didn't have deep roots, they died. Other seeds fell among thorns that grew up and choked out the tender plants. Still, other seeds fell on fertile soil, and they produced a crop that was 30, 60, and even 100 times as much as had been planted. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand. His disciples came and asked him, "Why do you use parables when you talk to people?" Matthew 13, 3-10. A prayer for the hero. Righteous God, maker and source of everything true, good, and just, help us to better align our lives to yours. Show us what true self-sacrifice means and how to better live it in a world you created. Give us the desire to learn what is right and hate what is evil, as well as the ability to never call one the other. Give us the courage to fight for goodness in the way you have so perfectly exemplified, even if no one else fights with us. Show us the value of truth, peace, love, and innocence. Help us practice in small ways the choice of the hero, laying down our lives for something greater, so that when much is asked of us, we will be ready and willing to answer the call. Thank you that in our struggle for good, we never struggle alone. Help us to be the heroes you have created us to be. Amen. I find it interesting how the author used stories from movies to give us an example that shows us that stories really do shape our lives, and stories need to be thought about a little bit more when they're being made, because they do make an impact on our lives. They make an impact on children's lives. They make an impact on every age. You don't realize it, but they do. Sometimes we can connect with the characters, and sometimes we cry, sometimes we laugh. But any of you out there who are creative, any of you out there who have a social media platform or decide that you're going to be a writer or maybe go into film or, use your creativity to tell stories, keep this in mind. Sure, stories with villains are great, and sure, stories of selfishness and self-indulging things are popular. But keep in mind that stories do change the world, and sometimes it may only change a person or two. But you want to make sure that your story is going to change people for the better. I hope you all have a great week. And I do want to let you know that I do want to start streaming sometime. So I hope that you will visit me on my live streams when they do happen this summer. And God bless you all. Bye-bye.